The prince removed his signet ring and handed it to his valet without a word. The gold band had been on his finger since the day he turned 18. It bore the crest of the House of Ashford, the royal seal that opened doors across the kingdom, commanded armies, and made grown men bow. And now it sat in the palm of a servant like a discarded coin. "Your Highness, this is madness," the valet whispered, his voice trembling. Prince Alexander of Eldoria did not respond. He was already pulling off his embroidered waistcoat, the one stitched with silver thread that had taken 3 seamstresses 6 weeks to complete. The silk fell to the floor in a puddle of wasted wealth. He reached for the rough woolen tunic hanging on the back of the door, the one his groom wore when mucking out the stables. "Madness," the valet repeated, more desperately this time. "Your father will." "My father will never know," Alexander said, his voice flat and final. "And if you tell him, I will have you sent to the northern colonies to count sheep for the rest of your miserable life." The valet's mouth snapped shut. Alexander pulled the coarse tunic over his head. The wool scratched against his skin, rough and unfamiliar. He had never worn anything so common in all his 26 years. His trousers were plain brown wool now, his boots scuffed and worn. He had arranged for a small room in the servants' quarters of a tavern near the city gate. 3 days, that was all he needed. 3 days of pretending to be someone else, someone ordinary, someone who would never be looked at for his title or his fortune. The prince had grown tired of it, tired of the endless parade of noblewomen who smiled with painted lips and cold eyes, their families pushing them forward like livestock at auction. They did not see him. They saw a crown. They saw palaces and power. They saw a future of privilege and influence. They never saw the man who stayed awake at night wondering if anyone would ever love him for his soul rather than his station. His father, the king, had given him an ultimatum: choose a bride by the end of the season, or the crown would choose for him. That was 3 weeks away. 3 weeks to find someone real. Someone who looked at him and saw Alexander, not the prince. So he would become invisible. A poor guard, a man with nothing but his strength and his wits. He would walk among the common people and see if anyone could truly see him. That was the plan. The plan did not account for her. She was tending the horses when he arrived at the stable yard, and she was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. That was not an exaggeration. Alexander had attended countless balls. He had been introduced to the most celebrated beauties in the kingdom. He had stood in ballrooms filled with diamonds and silk, and women who spent hours arranging their hair to catch his eye. None of them had ever made his breath catch the way this woman did. She was not dressed in silk. She wore a plain grey gown, patched at the elbows, the fabric faded from years of washing. Her sleeves were rolled up to her elbows, revealing strong, capable arms. Her dark hair was pulled back in a simple knot, with tendrils escaping around her face. There was dirt on her cheek, a smear of it, and she did not seem to care. She was speaking softly to the horse, a massive draft animal that was clearly distressed. The horse was pacing in its stall, ears pinned back, eyes wild. The girl stood in front of it, her voice calm and low, her hands extended. "Easy now," she murmured. "Easy. No one's going to hurt you. You're safe." The horse stomped its foot. She did not flinch. "Breathe, old friend. Just breathe." She stepped closer, and the horse allowed it. Her hand reached out and touched the animal's neck, and Alexander saw the creature's tense muscles relax beneath her palm. The horse let out a long breath, and so did Alexander, though he had not realized he was holding his. "Who are you?" he asked, the words escaping before he could stop them. She turned at the sound of his voice. Her eyes were green, not the pale green of spring leaves, but the deep, rich green of a forest at dusk. She studied him for a moment, her gaze sharp and assessing. He was wearing his common clothes. His face was unshaven, His hair was untidy. He looked like what he was pretending to be. She saw nothing of value in him. He could tell. Her eyes flickered over him with the brief disinterest of someone who had better things to think about. "I'm the groom," she said. "Or have you never seen a woman who works for her bread before?" Alexander blinked. No one spoke to him that way. No one. But she did not know who he was. She saw a poor man in worn clothes, and she spoke to him as an equal. It was extraordinary. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I didn't mean to stare. The horse. You calmed him so quickly. Most people would have backed away." She shrugged. "Horses are honest. They don't pretend to be anything they're not. You just have to listen to them." She was right. Horses were honest. People were not. Alexander had learned that lesson 1,000 times over. "I'm looking for work," he said, the lie coming easily. "They told me at the tavern that the stables might need an extra hand." She studied him again, and this time her eyes were less dismissive. She took in his height, his broad shoulders, the muscles visible even beneath his rough tunic. He had trained with swords and horses since childhood. His body was that of a warrior, even if his clothes were not. "You've handled horses before?" "Yes," he said, "many times." "Then come in and prove it." She gestured toward the stable with a tilt of her head. The master doesn't trust anyone who talks big without showing they can do the work. And so Alexander followed her into the stable, the scent of hay and horses filling his nostrils. It was a familiar smell, but somehow it felt different now, more real, more honest, as she had said. She handed him a brush. "Start with the bay mare in the 4th stall. She's skittish, but she responds to a gentle hand. If you scare her, you're out. Understand?" Understood. He did as he was told. He had been riding since he was 4 years old. He knew horses intimately. He had grown up in a palace full of the finest bloodstock in the kingdom, and yet, as he worked, he found himself watching her. She moved through the stable with an easy confidence, checking water buckets, tossing hay, speaking soft words to each animal she passed. She was not trying to impress anyone, she was just doing her work, and she was beautiful in every movement. "What's your name?" he asked, trying to sound casual. She paused. "Why do you want to know?" "Because we're working together now. I should know what to call you." "Elena," she said after a moment. "And you?" "Alex." It was the first time in his life he had ever introduced himself without his title. It felt strange. It felt freeing. "Well, Alex, if you're going to work here, you need to learn a few things." She walked over to him, close enough that he could smell the hay and sunshine in her hair. "That mare you're brushing, her name is Daisy. She hates loud noises and sudden movements. She was beaten by her previous owner. It takes her a long time to trust anyone." "Who beat her?" Alexander asked, anger flickering in his chest. "A man who had no soul," Elena said simply. "He's gone now. The horse is here. That's all that matters." Alexander looked at the horse. She was a gentle creature, with soft brown eyes and a kind face. He could see the faint white scars along her side where the whip had marked her. He ran his hand gently over her neck, and she leaned into his touch. "I'd like to meet the man who did this to her," he said quietly. "I'd like to show him exactly how it feels." Elena laughed. It was a warm sound, genuine and free. "You talk like you could actually do something about it." Alexander looked at her. "I can." She tilted her head, curious. "What are you, Alex? You're not like the other laborers who come through here. You speak too well. You stand too straight, and you look at horses like you've known them your whole life." He had to be careful. He could not reveal himself. Not yet. Not until he knew her better. "I was a soldier," he said. "A captain. I've been away. Now I'm trying to find a different life. Something quieter." She nodded slowly. "A soldier. That explains the way you carry yourself. And the way you're looking at me right now, like you're deciding whether I'm trustworthy. Are you? Shouldn't I be asking you that? She countered. You're the one who showed up looking for work with no references and no one to vouch for you. For all I know, you're a thief. I'm not a thief. Good. Because we have a lot of thieves around here. They come for the horses mostly. There's a ring of them operating in the city, stealing valuable animals and selling them across the border. The master's been worried about it for weeks. Alexander filed that information away. A horse theft ring. Interesting. Have they taken any from here? He asked. Not yet, but we're careful. Every horse in this stable is watched day and night. She smiled suddenly, a flash of mischief in her green eyes. I'm the night watch sometimes. I sleep in the hayloft and listen for anyone who doesn't belong. You sleep in the hayloft? It's warm, and the animals are good company. She shrugged. Better than most people, anyway. She was a mystery, this girl. A groom with no family and no past, she said. She had been taken in by the stable master years ago, and she had worked here ever since. No one knew where she came from. She never spoke of it, and Alexander realized that she was hiding something too. It was the way she reacted to certain things, the way she flinched when a man's voice was raised, the way her eyes darted to the shadows when strangers approached, the way she seemed to be waiting for someone to find her. The third night, Alexander found her sitting in the hayloft, staring out at the stars. He climbed up to join her, not sure if he was welcome, but unable to stay away. You're always watching, she said, without turning around. You think I don't notice, but I do. I'm not trying to be. She looked at him then, and there was something vulnerable in her expression, something he had not seen before. Why are you really here, Alex? You didn't come here just to brush horses. I've seen the way you look at the stable master. You're not afraid of him. You're not afraid of anything, are you? No, he admitted. I'm not. Then what are you afraid of? He was silent for a moment. Then he said, being alone forever, being married to someone who only wants my... He stopped himself just in time. Someone who only wants my money. She laughed softly. You don't have money, Alex. You're a poor guard with nothing to his name. He smiled. Maybe, but I'm afraid of it anyway. Being wanted for things that have nothing to do with who I am inside. Doesn't that frighten you? Her smile faded. Yes, she whispered. It frightens me more than anything. They sat in silence, watching the stars, and Alexander felt something shift between them. A connection, a thread of understanding that ran deep and true. He wanted to tell her who he was. He wanted to sweep her off her feet and take her to the palace and show her what it felt like to be a princess. But he could not yet. He needed to know her heart. He needed to know that she could love him for himself, not for his crown. It happened on the 5th day. Alexander was mucking out the stalls, a job he had never imagined doing, but one that he had grown to enjoy because it brought him close to Elena. They worked side by side, their shoulders brushing, their hands nearly touching. The attraction between them was electric, unspoken, undeniable. And then the scream came. It was Elena's voice, sharp and terrified. Alexander dropped his pitchfork and ran toward the sound. He found her in Daisy's stall, struggling with a man in a dark hood. The man had a rope around the horse's neck and was trying to drag her out of the stable. "Let her go!" Elena shouted, yanking at the rope. "Let her go, you coward!" The man shoved her against the stall wall, and her head cracked against the wood. She fell, stunned, and the man dragged the panicking horse forward. Alexander did not think. He did not plan. He moved. He was across the stable in seconds, his hand closing around the thief's throat. The man was strong, but Alexander was stronger. He was a soldier, a warrior, a prince trained by the finest swordsman in the kingdom. He slammed the thief against the stall door and pinned him there. "Who sent you?" Alexander growled. "Who's behind the ring?" The thief's eyes went wide with shock. "Let me go! I don't know anything." "Liar!" Alexander tightened his grip, and the man began to choke. Elena scrambled to her feet, her hand pressed to her bleeding head. "Alex, stop! You'll kill him." "He deserves to die," Alexander said through gritted teeth. "He hurt you." And then he realized what he had just said. He had revealed his feelings, the possessiveness, the fury, the desperate need to protect her. It was all there, written on his face. Elena stared at him, her green eyes wide. "Alex." He let the thief go. The man collapsed, gasping for air, and Alexander stepped back. "Get out," he said coldly. "But if you ever come near her again, I'll find you, and I will not be merciful." The thief scrambled away, disappearing into the darkness. Alexander turned to Elena. She was bleeding, and the sight of the blood on her forehead made him feel sick. "You're hurt. Let me see." "I'm fine." She pulled away from him. "I've had worse." "That's not the point. You shouldn't have to endure any of this." She laughed bitterly. "Life is hard, Alex. You of all people should know that. You're a soldier. You've seen things. You've done things." "Yes," he said, "but not this. Not watching someone I care about get hurt." She went still. "Someone you care about." He looked at her, and in that moment he decided. He was done pretending. He was done hiding. This woman was more real than anyone he had ever met, and he would not lose her because of his pride. "Yes," he said, "you. I care about you, Elena, and I can't pretend anymore." Her face went pale. "What do you mean?" He reached for her hand, and she let him take it. Her skin was warm and calloused from years of work. It was the most beautiful hand he had ever touched. "I'm not who I said I was," he admitted. "My name is Alexander, and I am the Prince of Eldoria." She stared at him. For a long moment, she said nothing. Then she laughed. It was not the warm laugh he had grown to love. It was hollow, bitter, bitterer than anything he had ever heard. "The prince," she repeated. "The prince. Oh, you're richer than the devil himself." "It's not about the money, Elena. It's not about the title. I came here because I wanted to find someone who could love me for who I really am." "And did you find her?" "Yes," he said. "I think I did." She pulled her hand away. "You're a fool, Alex, or whatever your name is. You came looking for someone who would love you without your title. Do you know who I am?" He shook his head, confused. "You're Elena. You're the groom. You're—" "No," she said sharply. "I'm not. I'm Lady Eleanor of Carrington, the daughter of the Duke of Northwood, the woman whose family lost everything 6 years ago when your father's ministers seized our lands for back taxes." Alexander felt the blood drain from his face. "What?" "My father died in debtor's prison," she continued, her voice shaking with rage and pain. "My mother died of a broken heart a month later. I was left with nothing, nothing. I had to become a servant just to survive. Do you know what that feels like, Your Highness? To lose everything. To have no one? To be so invisible that the man who should have been your ally doesn't even know who you are." "Elena, You were kind to me," she said, her voice cracking. "You were the first person who ever looked at me and saw a person instead of a servant. And I thought maybe I could be happy with you. But you're the enemy. You're everything I hate. Wait, please." He reached for her again, but she stepped back. "I didn't know. I swear it. I had nothing to do with what happened to your family. I was only a boy when that happened. You were the prince. You could have stopped it. You could have done something. I didn't even know. Does that make it better?" she cried. "Does that make it right?" He had no answer. because the truth was, he had been blind. He had lived in his gilded cage, oblivious to the suffering of people like her, people who had lost everything while he dined on silver platters. "I'm sorry," he said, and he meant it with every fiber of his being. "I'm so sorry, Elena. I didn't know, but I know now, and I want to make it right." "How?" she demanded. "You can't bring back my parents. You can't give me back my childhood. You can't." "I can't," he agreed. "But I can give you a future, one where you never have to work in a stable again, one where you have everything you deserve, one where I spend the rest of my life making sure you are loved and cherished." She shook her head, tears streaming down her face. "It's too late. I loved you, Alex. I loved the man I thought you were. But you're not that man. You're a prince who played a game with my heart, and I can't forgive that." She turned and ran, disappearing into the darkness of the stable. Alexander stood there, frozen, his heart shattering into a million pieces. He found her in the hayloft the next day. She was sitting in the same spot where they had watched the stars. She looked up at him with red-rimmed eyes, and his heart ached at the sight. "Go away," she said. "No. I said go away, Alex. I'm not leaving until you hear me out." She turned away from him, her shoulders stiff with anger. What could you possibly say to fix this? He climbed up into the loft and sat beside her, close enough to touch, but he did not reach for her. Not yet. "I came here because I wanted to find someone who would love me for who I am," he said quietly. "But what I found was someone who could have hated me for who I am, and she didn't. You didn't, Elena. You looked at me and saw a man, a tired, lonely man who just wanted someone to see him. And you did. You saw me. You saw everything." She did not respond, but he saw her hands tremble. "I know I can't undo what happened to your family," he continued, "and I can't take back the years of suffering you've endured. But I can promise you this, you will never suffer again. Not if I have anything to say about it. You will be taken care of. You will be respected. And you will never, ever be invisible again." "You're asking me to trust you," she whispered. "After everything. I'm asking you to give me a chance, one chance, to prove that I am worthy of you." She turned to look at him, and there was something in her eyes that gave him hope. A flicker of warmth, buried deep beneath the pain. "One chance," she repeated. "That's all I can offer." He nodded, his heart pounding. "One chance. That's all I need." It was not easy. Their love was built on a foundation of secrets and lies and pain. But they built it anyway. Alexander returned to the palace and told his father the truth. He was going to marry Lady Eleanor of Carrington. The king protested. The advisors protested. But the prince would not be swayed. He had found his real wife. He would not let her go. And when the wedding took place, it was the grandest affair the kingdom had ever seen. Elena wore a gown of white silk with diamonds in her hair, and Alexander could not take his eyes off her. "You're beautiful," he whispered as they stood before the altar. She smiled, that warm, genuine smile that he had fallen in love with. "You're not so bad yourself, Your Highness." "I'm not a prince to you," he said. "I'm Alex, the man who loves you." "And I love you," she said, "even though you're completely ridiculous." He laughed, loud and joyful. "That's why I fell in love with you in the first place. You never let me be anything but myself." The bishop began the ceremony, and Alexander felt the weight of his future settle over him. It was not a burden, it was a gift. He was marrying the woman he loved, and he would spend the rest of his life proving to her that she had made the right choice. The horse thieves were eventually captured. The ringleader was a lesser lord who had been selling the animals to fund his gambling debts. He was sentenced to the northern colonies for life. Alexander had wanted worse, but Elena had counseled mercy. "He's a man who lost his way," she had said, "just like everyone else in this story. Let him have a chance to find it again. And Alexander had agreed, because she was right. Everyone had made mistakes. Everyone had secrets, and everyone deserved a chance at redemption. Even a prince who went undercover to find a real wife and found so much more than he had ever hoped. They lived happily ever after, but not in the way you might imagine. Their happiness was not perfect. It had cracks, it had arguments, it had difficult days and sleepless nights, but it also had something deeper: trust, respect, and an unshakable love that had been forged in the fire of their shared trials. Elena never forgot where she came from. She became known as the princess who worked alongside the servants, who treated everyone with kindness and respect, who never looked down on anyone because of their station. Alexander became known as the prince who listened, the prince who had gone among the people and seen them as they truly were. The prince who had learned that love was not about titles or wealth or power. It was about seeing someone, truly seeing them, and choosing them anyway, even when they were not who they claimed to be, even when everything seemed impossible, even when the whole world was against them. Because that was what love was: a choice, a promise, a chance. And they had taken it, both of them, together. If you made it to the end of this story, you are exactly the kind of person I write for, someone who believes in love, second chances, and happily ever afters. Please do 2 things for me right now. First, hit that like button. It takes 1 second and helps this story reach thousands more romance lovers just like you. Second, click subscribe and turn on the bell. We release a new historical romance story every week, and you do not want to miss what's coming next. Thank you for being here. Your support means everything. Now go find your own happily ever after, or at least enjoy a cup of tea while you dream about one.